Hello, everyone. I'm Bandish, founder of The Curious Mindset, a private community for technology leadership teams powered by 64 Tech, an IT solutions provider across hardware, cloud, IT services, data, and AI. Now, while 64 Tech powers us, the strength of this community is its people. Together, we're building a world where no technology leader leads alone. We exist to help technology leaders become the best versions of themselves, because the most challenging part of leadership isn't the technology, it's the people. And as you know, in a fast-moving world, most technology leaders are stuck in reactive mode, firefighting issues, buried in strategy decks, and chasing delivery, until the space to grow quietly disappears. That's why we built the Curious Mindset, a private invitation-only community that brings technology leadership teams together and connects them with exceptional minds who share perspectives on leadership. No membership fees, no sales pitches, just a space to learn, connect, and grow through shared curiosity, deeper connection, and honest conversations. Please follow our 64 Tech LinkedIn page for updates. And if a partnership with 64 Tech could support your tech team, or if you're ready to shake things up with your IT suppliers, please use the link below to book a call in with me. Now, this community was born out of my own experiences, and I know how it feels to lead in isolation, and I didn't want others to go through it alone. Our guiding belief is simple: together we grow. If you believe in what we're building, please stay connected and share it with others. This community grows through invitation and reputation, and it only works when we build it together. We've moved our community from Slack to WhatsApp, making it even easier to stay connected and join the conversation. Please follow the link below to be added or reach out to Bryony directly. Now, it's my pleasure to hand you over to our resident host, Andy McMenemy, our technology leader co-host, Steve Maxwell, and our returning special guest, Dominic Colenso. Thank you.
Vanish, thank you so much. As always, thank you for your generosity. Thank you for your continued support of the Curious Mindset via 64 Tech. It's fair to say we all know we wouldn't be here without that generosity and without your consistency in always showing up and always helping us to have this amazing platform available for us to learn from amazing speakers like our guest today, Dominic. So Dominic Colenso is the author of Cut Through, a book which is about...
Again, what's next? Is it Davis Fun or TGS? I don't know.
So we're getting some cut through here. Sorry. Dominic is the author of the book Cut Through, which is due to be launched on the 2nd of December. Today, Dominic's going to help us to understand how to cut through complexity in communication so that we can communicate innovation with impact. Now, Dominic has a incredible record. He's an actor. He's one of my favorite actors because he played the part of Virgil in the Thunderbirds movie. So as I bring him on, well, let's have a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And can we all welcome Dominic Colenso to the Curious Mindset? Dominic, great to see you.
Thank you, Andy. Great to be here. Most of you are sitting there thinking, well, I don't recognize him. Like, I seriously wouldn't expect you to. But if you go and Google Thunderbirds 2004 with Sir Ben Kingsley and Bill Paxton, then you might see me flying Thunderbird 2 there. Yeah, don't ruin your weekend with it. But if you've got young kids, they'll really enjoy it.
And as we said, Dominic, you are a returning guest and very, very welcome indeed. I know the subject matter today is absolutely going to resonate. But can I just ask the audience, if you saw Dominic live in London in 2022, let's have a thumbs up in the chat so we can see who was engaged in that session where Dominic was live for us. So loads of questions for you, Dominic, and there's a lovely audience of people that are all fully engaged in this subject for sure. And I wonder if you could help us to understand then, how can an actor create engagement or help us as leaders to be able to create more engagement in the way that we communicate?
Yeah, I think it was really interesting hearing Bandish talk at the beginning and seeing the video there. There's a huge parallel between what this community is trying to achieve and what actors do. And I think there's a danger sometimes that if you engage with someone like me, you think, well, you're going to try and make us be someone else. But that's really not the kind of thing here. It's about how do we be the best version of ourselves? How do we understand ourselves as a performer, because we are all in the spotlight all of the time. As leaders, we are continually having to motivate our teams, firefight, challenge, lead the vision and the values and the strategy, and just deal with that day to day in a way that needs to capture hearts as well as minds. And I think that's what actors are really brilliant at, is understanding the range available to them and really getting clear on which bits of themselves to turn up and which bits of themselves to turn down. So I don't want anyone listening to be thinking, oh gosh, I've got to go and be someone else. That's not the idea here. It's about, how do I be the best version of myself in any given moment?
And I guess one of those powerful pieces is creating more gravitas in the way that we do actually hold the audience and hold that space when we're presenting.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talk a lot about presence, don't we? We say an actor has great stage presence. And what that actually means is that they are there in the moment. We live in a world that is full of distractions. Most people sitting here listening to this have another browser window open, their Teams messages are pinging, maybe their mobile phone's on the desk and WhatsApp's going off. And it's actually very difficult right now to really live in that present moment. But when you ground yourself in the present, your presence increases. And there are naturally things that we can do in terms of physical expansiveness and relaxation, but from a fundamental point, if you see, I don't know, Judi Dench on stage, you believe that she is there in the moment as the character having a conversation with the other character, and you don't for a second think that she might be thinking about her shopping list or what time she needs to pick the grandchildren up from school. She's absolutely there. And we can all, as leaders, as human beings, learn a great deal from that in terms of how do we presence ourselves, and how do we make sure that we're there for our teams and really kind of listening and engaging, and not just onto the next thing and onto the next thing.
And I'm curious immediately, Dominic, I wonder what nuggets of wisdom you could share with us for perhaps rituals that you have found very successful for doing that just before we start to communicate, or
Yeah.
step on stage if that's the case, or present to an audience. What sort of rituals do you know of that others use, and
Yeah.
what do you favor?
So I try and use a combination, because I think we all have a brake and we all have an accelerator, and we'll find ourselves needing to use both in any journey, right? You can't just drive down the motorway and never touch the brake, and equally you're not going to go anywhere if you don't press the accelerator at moments. So part of it is understanding where you are before you have that conversation, and this can be jumping on a Teams meeting, or this can be standing up at your annual conference and delivering the big message for the year. But one of the key things to understand is where you are, and do you need to dial things up or do you need to dial things down? And I'd actually encourage people to play around with both. So I was actually in Birmingham yesterday, speaking at the National Sales Conference. There's about 500 people in the room. And what I did for the sort of 15 minutes before I went on stage was I very much got myself into a place of calm. So I'm a big proponent and user of breathing techniques. It was something I learned very early on as an actor. I used to go bright red and flush whenever I had to go in front of an audience. I'm an introvert, by the way. I'm not an extrovert, so it costs me to be out in that sort of environment. But just taking a kind of deep breath, getting the breath down out of the thorax and into the diaphragm. And just, not, I don't need to meditate and sit on a cloud while I do that, but just to be moving around the room, talking to the sound engineers, getting everything set up, but with that focus of breath and calm and grounding, then gave me a springboard. And in the 2 minutes before I needed to go on, I was backstage, so no one else could see me. And I was having a little bit of a roll and a little bit of a move, and kind of just starting to really build that energy back up, so that when I walked out there, I was leading the energy in the room. And I think that's absolutely vital. Leadership is about being in the spotlight, but holding that space for other people. And if you walk out into, you know, your office and everyone's at a level 4 and you're at a level 4, then there's no differentiation there, and you have to be you know, more present, more alive, if you want people to tune into you. So I use the brake to get myself grounded, and then the accelerator just before I need to kick off to get myself going.
I love that analogy because it forms a lovely picture. And I've often used a similar phrase. I've said, well, as a leader in our organizations, are we the thermometer or are we the thermostat? So
Right.
are we just testing the temperature or are we setting the environment and the culture? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a perfect alignment with the brake and accelerator. I love that.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's interesting what actors do, and you know, and how they approach the, you know, the creation of a character, and how many kind of parallels there are, I think, with that leadership process. um for me, when I was thinking about crafting a character as an actor, it all began with awareness, right? I had to really, yeah, understand the context that I was in. You know, was this a modern play? Were we going back in time? What was the relationship of my character to the other characters? What research could I do to understand the situation? That's just, you know, leadership 101. Who's my audience? How what's going on right now? What are the problems? What are the challenges? Where are the potential wins? And then I think a big piece of acting and a big piece of leadership is actually around bravery. You have to be comfortable with stepping out of the secure space of being part of the pack and actually stand up and be seen. And you know, everyone on this call today is a subject matter expert. You're all people that will have deep knowledge in your area of the business. And then what often happens is once we kind of get spotted as someone that is talented or, you know, good at the job, then you get kind of removed from being that subject matter expert, and suddenly you're leading a team, and you don't necessarily have you know, the same level of preparation for that. You're just sort of thrust out into this new role. And the big difference between being a team member and being the leader of the team is that you stand apart from the group. Yes, you want to put your arms around everyone and bring everyone along for the journey, but when stuff happens, people look to you and point to you, and you're outside of that pack. And in order to be a great performer and in order to be a great leader, I think we have to make brave choices. We have to step outside of the comfort zone, try new stuff, be prepared to fail. And I always think that with vulnerability comes power, actually. When you are prepared to be vulnerable in front of your team, when you're prepared to say, I don't know, you're kind of saying, like, you don't need to be scared of me, and I'm not scared of you. I'm here to open up that dialogue. And I think the more vulnerable we can be in those scenarios, the better, really.
Let me invite you to be vulnerable. Take us back in time and tell us how you created the persona then, as you were for Commander of Thunderbird 2 as Virgil.
So, I mean, it goes back to some of the things that I've been saying. There was a, you know, believe it or not, even though it's a kind of, you know, kids blockbustery type movie and it's all set in fictional make believe, we knew that we had to be, you know, very mindful of the original series and the fan base, and we had to kind of honor Jerry Anderson and Sylvia Anderson and the creators of the show. So I spent a lot of time watching the 1960s puppet show and trying to kind of get the vibe and understand the relationship between the different brothers. And I've got in the loft like tons of the original drawings of the spacecraft, and really kind of, you know, went into that world, but then also had to think about, you know, where do I want to take this as a new iteration? And I think that's really relevant to leaders as well. Is like when our job is not to recreate the past. often we have to, or wants to, honor what has gone before us, but we're trying to create a new flavor, take things in a slightly new direction. If we just cut off and pretend that that past thing didn't happen, then often we get a huge amount of pushback. But if we acknowledge what was, talk about where we are, and paint the picture of where we want to go, then people are much more likely to kind of come on that journey with us.
I think that's a lovely point, because by being vulnerable and being authentic, we give other people permission to do the same. And we do evolve, don't we? We evolve as leaders, we evolve in our communication style, we evolve the gravitas, as we've spoken about already, and how we learn to hold audiences' attention.
Mm.
And so I'm kind of curious, just your new book is launched on the 2nd of December,
Yeah.
cut through. What are some of the important elements then, Dominic, that people need to have in order to cut through and then maybe to communicate with impact? Bearing
Yeah.
in mind that some people may be just newly into a role of responsibility and some people have been long-standing authorities.
So when I started researching the book, I just got very curious about, why do certain messages land and others not? And you can have really kind of talented individuals with a huge amount of knowledge who've done some brilliant research who just don't seem to be able to get that idea out into the world. And then, let's be honest, you have some people that are talking what we might think of as absolute nonsense, but it seems to be resonating with an audience and it's winning hearts and minds. And so I started to kind of look into what was causing this. And there were three elements that really kind of jumped out to me, that kind of, when you get to the intersection of those three elements, that's the kind of cut through sweet spot, if you like. So the first element for me is simplicity. And again, if we go back to that idea that every single person on this call is a subject matter expert, the danger with being a subject matter expert is that you know the thing inside out and back to front. So you start talking about it in the way that you know to talk about it, and everyone goes, hang on, what's going on here? Yeah. And you're kind of almost speaking a different language. So if you're thinking, as a technology leader in the boardroom, speaking to the sales director or to someone in finance, that they've literally got a different set of words that they would use to describe the same sort of thing. So we've got to be really mindful that we are simplifying that message as much as we can. Now, this is not about dumbing things down. It's about creating an environment where people want to lean in and ask us more, rather than lean back and disconnect. Because especially in the boardroom, no one wants to lose face. So if you start talking about something in a really technical way, in a very detailed and deep discussion or description of what's going on in the business, it costs a huge amount of ego for someone else to put their hand up and stop you and say, I really don't understand. And so the danger is that people mask the misunderstanding, and then things get nodded through or don't get challenged, or do get challenged due to misunderstanding. And so our job as leaders is to really simplify that message. A great place to look to this is the newspaper industry. They're absolutely brilliant. The headline on the front of a newspaper is the thing that sells the newspaper. It creates that curiosity. If you're curious enough about what's written on the front of the newspaper, you might just part with your £1 or your £3.20, whatever it costs these days, and you might actually buy the thing. And then you get the detail. But you had to draw people in with the headline. If a newspaper was just covered in text, no one would buy it, right? So we've got to draw people in with that kind of simplicity to start with. The next piece for me is really emotion. So what is the emotional journey that you want to take your audience on? And when I talk about this initially with most of my clients, people just kind of look at me like I'm an alien. They're like, what do you mean? What do I want people to feel? But actually, we've really got to focus on engaging people's hearts as well as their heads. So we've got to think about that emotional journey that we want to take them on. How do you want them to feel at the end of the conversation? And what gear changes are you going to have as you go through? Because if you just, I could spend the next 20 minutes trying to excite you about the wonderful methodology in my new, and like people will be turning down the volume and tuning out. Like, oh no, stop. So we've got to have light and dark. It's like a great piece of music. It's got to have that nuance. And we might want to start by challenging the people around that boardroom table. Have they thought about the tech strategy and whether it's fit for purpose and what the risks are to the business if we're not implementing certain policies and solutions? And then we might want to educate them about the things that are available to us right now and the features and the benefits of each and the timelines for how long that might take. And then we might want to move on to exciting them, because actually if we do this, not only do we protect ourselves, but there's a real return on investment, because we're going to be future fit and we're going to be more effective and it's going to improve productivity and all of that. And you can see, like, just by moving through that emotional range, the performance starts to come to life, but also the language that you start to use changes too. So, I don't know anything about technology, but hopefully that sort of feels like the sort of conversation that could be happening in the boardroom, just by putting those emotional intentions behind what you're saying. So we start with simplicity, we then move on to emotion. And then the third piece of the jigsaw for me is energy. And if you look at any of the kind of big messages that do cut through in the world of politics or advertising, those sort of products that seem to pop up from nowhere and potentially disappear. I think that Prime energy drink was a good example of that. I got an 11-year-old daughter who's desperately trying to get hold of these new fads. But what is behind all of that stuff is a huge surge in energy and a real kind of push to get in front of the audience and to make an impact with the audience. And that comes back to the gravitas piece that we were talking about earlier, in terms of your own delivery. It's what energy level are you bringing to the table? I talked about, I think of it as a scale of 1 to 10. So 1 is like man flu, can't get out of bed. 10 is 2 cans of Red Bull, packet of M&Ms, right? We don't want to be right up there because that's going to be too much. But we want to be at least, I would say, a level 8. We've got to be leading the energy in the room. And when we're down the lens of the camera, that's even more important. So this is me probably at an 8.5, because I am very aware that I am responsible for keeping all of these people on this screen listening right now. And that actually, if I kind of take it back and just sort of think about what it is that we're talking about, very quickly people will start to switch off. Yeah, other things will become more important. So it's my job to lead that energy in the room. So that's the kind of basic formula for cut through. It's simplicity, it's emotion, and it's energy.
Well, you're doing a great job. The energy's there. I can feel it. So thank you so much. And it's really important, because some of our tech leaders, I'm sure, are communicating a lot of data, a lot of factual information,
Yeah.
and the real skill, I guess, and the real power, and what you're doing so well here, is painting pictures with the words that you're using. So that helps them to align the emotions, doesn't it? We're creating images in their minds of what the future might look like, because we want them to go on the journey with us.
Yeah.
Or the risks involved of us not taking a certain action. And how can we become better at perhaps doing that, about bringing those pictures alive in the words that we use, Dominic?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's often a kind of fear from people around the idea of storytelling. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm not a storyteller. That's something you do for kids at bedtime. And it doesn't work for me, because I work in IT or finance or something that is a little bit more granular. But of course, it's not about kind of creating a floral narrative. It's about creating actually logic for your audience. So there are two types of movie, broadly speaking. There is a blockbuster movie, your kind of Top Guns and your, I don't know, your Harry Potters and all of those sorts of things. And then there are your art house movies, stuff by Quentin Tarantino and the Coen brothers. And I don't know about you, Andy, but I need to be in a certain mood to watch those sorts of art house movies. Like, I like if it's Thursday night and I just want to zone out, I'm much more likely to turn on Traitors than I am to sit down with the latest Quentin Tarantino. But what we can learn from that is that actually for our audience to easily consume our material, if we can package it up in a way that is simple and logical and follows a chronological time order, then people are much more likely to kind of hang on to what's going on. So a Quentin Tarantino film will have flashbacks, a flash forward, new character coming in from the side. And actually, if we think about the conversations that we're having in the boardroom, quite often we're guilty of doing the same. So someone will say, can you give us a project update? And you'll say, yeah, well, we think that this thing's going to be completed in about a month and a half. We did have a bit of a nightmare 3 weeks ago when something went offline, but thankfully today Bob's just done this, and I know that a year ago we weren't sure whether we were going to get here, and people are like, hang on, like, where have we gone? Whereas actually, if you can create that kind of blockbuster narrative, well, 6 months ago, we had a real issue with A, B, and C. I know that 2 weeks ago, Bob was having problems with X, but I'm pleased to say that today we are in a really good place, and we're very happy with how things are progressing, and we're due to go live in 2 weeks' time. We've now got a linear narrative that's much easier for our audience to understand. So we've got to get good at just using that very kind of basic, I suppose, framework of past, what used to happen, present, where are we now, and future, what's coming up next, and try to stop kind of jumping through the different sort of time zones and actually take our audience with us on that journey.
I'm being subjected to chick flicks at the moment with the
Oh, yeah.
Christmas, so I'm not sure what category that fits into.
They have a category all of their own. No comment.
There's plenty of emotions in there anyway.
Yeah.
Excellent. I know there's lots of questions coming through, so we'll just I'll bring our session up to a little bit of a close, and we'll pass over to Steve shortly, Dominic.
Fabulous.
But so what nuggets of wisdom can you share then? Because you mentioned that you're, slightly introverted. What can you share for introverts to help them find the confidence in the way that they can communicate with a little bit more gravitas, and
Yeah.
perhaps take the audience on that journey of, vivid imagery?
So I am, the person that, if I have my own way at a networking event, I'm on my phone pretending to send really important emails, right? It doesn't light me up to have to be in those situations. So a few things that I'm thinking about is a managing my energy. So I know that I need to have a good night's sleep before I do that sort of thing. But also that I need to bake in some time afterwards just to sit in the car and kind of decompress. But I think it's really about, walking in there with a very clear intention of why am I having these conversations. And this can be, external networking stuff, or to be honest, it can be walking the floor on the office. Like, what am I looking to get out of the next 20 minutes, hour? What's the objective? Can I set myself some quick wins? So I'm a massive fan of getting that kind of dopamine hit for doing something that is relatively simple. So, can I just, shake one person's hand, make eye contact, and ask them, where are they from? That's a really useful networking question, by the way. Where are you from? Because they can say, I'm, from Scotland, or they can say, I'm from 64 Tech. We start to get some different conversations. But then also, when I'm being asked to engage, I will often go into storytelling mode. So that past, present, future framework that I just shared with you, that was actually something that I developed off the back of some awful networking experiences, because I kept going to those horrible, what are they called, Chamber of Commerce meetings, like some limp bacon sandwich and some very watery coffee. And I got asked, what do you do? And I said, I run a training company. We're going back sort of 12, 13 years now. And there would be tumbleweed and people would be kind of going, I'm just going to get myself a croissant. And so I thought, there's got to be a better way. I've got to be able to keep people engaged. So I started to tell that story. I used to be an actor. I now work with businesses to share the toolkit that actors use to help people have more impact and influence. And next week, I'm off to Germany to work with a team of IT professionals. And what you get then is, oh, tell me about the acting. Or if they weren't interested in the acting, we did some Excel training last week. It was really brilliant. Or, oh, Germany, are you going anywhere near Hamburg? Because there's a really good bratwurst stand that you should go. Whatever it was, people would engage in that way. So manage your energy, have a clear objective, think about the story that you want to tell. And finally, just remember that most people don't want to be there either. Right? There's a few people that just lapping it up and really enjoying it, but most people just want to connect. So just go and be a human being. And if you spot someone that's on their own, go and say hi.
That's lovely. I love that, because you're absolutely right. The ones who want to be there are the extroverts, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And that's not us. I'm going to hand over to Steve now. Steve has a lovely exchange of energy, and he brings the questions through every time on form. So, Dominic, thank you so much. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Pleasure.
Really got some great takeaways from there. I'm looking forward to getting the book. So at this point, I'm going to invite Steve to come forward and let us know what's going on in the questions and answers.
Brilliant. Hey, Steve.
Hey, Dominic, thank you.